we are, dude. Our first podcast.
Yes, we are.
I'm like, if you see me wiggling, this is just me getting out the nerves right now. This is episode 1. Welcome to
How's it going?
On Occasion with Chris and Canaan. I'm Canaan.
I'm Chris.
And this is Chris.
Oh, you were going to say that.
No, it's good. This is our first episode. We can do whatever we want. Yeah, and this is how it's going to go. It's probably going to be, this first one's probably going to be a little unhinged.
Some bumpies.
Yeah, and you want to... I need a confidence boost.
I don't know what... I haven't seen this yet.
Oh, you need some?
No. I think the Old Spice is
Oh,
all
you
I
got
need.
Old Spice on?
Yeah.
I was going to say, this is going to help a lot.
Content.
I feel better already. I feel more masculine and confident that I smell... This is my wife's. I smell... all the confidence is gone. Okay. So our agenda today is to introduce this podcast. We want to talk about how we got started in photography, each of us, our relationship and friendship, and then also just our goal with this podcast and what we want this to be, where we want it to go. And I think maybe we should start there. I'll start there on that one. Yeah. So our goal with this podcast is one, just to have a lot of fun. When we were thinking about how we wanted this to go, we were like, we don't want it to be stuffy because we're not. And then also, like, there's a lot of podcasts that are just purely educational or purely...
We don't have that to offer.
And we don't really have that to offer. I'm not an educator.
No, we're not educated.
Neither that.
Right.
But here for a good time. And, you know, who knows about longevity on that side of things. But yeah, goal is just to have fun. We want to tell stories, talk about the industry, but then also, like, we want this to be pretty Nashville specific. So we intend to have a lot of friends on and them tell stories, whether that be nightmares or good things. We want to talk about inspiration, things that are inspiring us in the industry, people whose work we love, and kind of create a platform for everyone, friends, new friends, people we want to meet, and create space for that. You want to add anything to that, or you feel good?
Yeah, and I think also just for any couples that end up listening in, just, you know, we're hoping to give our perspective as photographers on, like, maybe even best practices, what to look for, how to make the most of your day when you're working with your planners, your florists, you know, venues, and how to, like, really maximize the time with your photographers to get the best photos that you want to remember forever, you know, because there's all sorts of ways that there's just holes to fill in, you know, that if you don't look out for, you'll just lose time on the wedding day and you won't get the shots that you really want. So we're hoping to kind of mitigate some of that. Yeah,
we should also mention that we're both photographers. So this is coming from the photography's perspective. Yeah.
I forgot that.
And Chris makes a really good point. This is kind of like a platform for both. We really, really want to, like, create space and have fun with our industry friends, but also create a platform that is beneficial to brides and folks who are planning their wedding or, you know, it's starting that process.
How many weddings do you think you photographed?
At this point? Oh, gosh, hundreds.
Yeah.
Hundreds at this point.
Right.
When
did you start?
I started, this is my 12th year shooting professionally. 12th or 13th.
Yeah, I think we started around the same time. I started
in there somewhere.
2011 is when I started.
Yeah, that was 2010, 2011.
Kind of part-time, but yeah.
Well, let's segue
sure.
right into it.
Let's go for it.
Go for it. You start. You're there.
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, I actually was a master electrician, and then I went to seminary for a little bit. And I think while I was in seminary, I was also living with some guys in an old pillow factory in Atlanta called Snake Nation. And it's true. It was a wild time. It was just a 6,000 square foot loft. A lot of my first night in that loft, I just met these guys. And the first night, there's this one 3,000 square foot room. And just like 7 or 8 dudes partying hard in this empty room, 15-foot ceilings by themselves. And when I went to bed, they had this guy named Clay, and they were throwing up in the air. They were all they had partied pretty hard. I had to go to work the next morning. So I wake up in the morning and this guy Clay is just ass naked, laying in this big 3,000 square foot room, no furniture in sight because we just moved in. And that was my introduction to these guys who, they ran an organization at the time as a nonprofit, and they did a lot of media work. And they actually did some partnership with Invisible Children, if you remember them. And but they were always editing films, and they had people from Invisible Children coming through a bunch. And so I was just around people doing media a lot. And I didn't really enjoy the electrical world. And so they started talking about weddings. And they had some friends in the industry. And I just kind of got sucked in. I was like, that's where I want to transition to is photography instead of being an electrician. I was a terrible electrician. That's many stories for another podcast series probably, but I wasn't good at it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought I'll just try my hand at photography, and it just worked out.
What was your first wedding like? Well, one, how did you get your first wedding, or what? Were you shooting? I'm assuming you shot second or third with someone.
Yeah, fortunately, I had some friends in Atlanta who were just Kate Byers and Bob Butler, just really talented photographers, and they're willing to let me just tag along. Mm-hmm. And then my first wedding was kind of, I don't remember, I think maybe this bride went to church with me, and somehow we got a meeting, and I just pretended like I was a pro already. We met at a coffee shop. I was like, oh yeah, I just do this all the time.
It's real fake it till you make it
situation. Yeah. And then I was a wedding somewhere in Alabama, and I remember like I found in my mind where I wanted to photograph her, but it was across this muddy field. And this woman I brought with me to second. This woman that came to second shoot with me, I was like taking the bride out in this field. She's like, you can't have her walk in her dress across the muddy field. And I just had never considered that because, I hadn't really been around women's apparel ever. So
not a lot of experience wearing women's apparel. You just didn't know how it was going to
flow. But
yeah, that's fine.
Not yet.
Not at the time.
Right.
But down the road.
Right.
You got there.
What about you? This is your first wedding.
Okay.
How'd you get into it?
Yeah. So, I got into it, I think, we're all in the 12, 13 year mark as far as shooting. When I got into this, I had friends who were working in the industry, and I had grown up shooting film. So my grandfather was a photographer, shot film, had his own, big dark room. So I grew up shooting with him, learning all film cameras and playing in the dark room. I like to say I was like playing Mad Scientist because it was so fun, like being in there. I remember being recently. Like a kid. Yeah. And I fell in love immediately with photographing people, even as a kid, like when I was learning how to do this. My grandfather shot I don't know. He really liked studio work, but like old school, like portraits, think like school photos from like the 80s and 90s, like at your high school. That's like what he liked. And then random, like, I guess you could call it architecture photography, but if you saw it, you would be like, that's just a picture of a building. That's not really creative. Mm-hmm. Would be his style. So I'll say this. He was a real technical photographer.
But he proved the buildings were there.
Yeah. He proved the buildings were there, and they were like really in focus, like sharp, real nice. I loved photographing people. So like growing up, as soon as I was able to get a camera, I would like gather my friends. I would like create costumes, and we'd do period pieces. Like I remember photographing my friends in an alley. We had like gone to a thrift store and gotten like trench coats and top hats and did like this 1920s mafia setup. So I like grew up doing that kind of stuff with film. Once I got to like high school, kind of fell out of it. Didn't touch a camera for like 8 years. Then I'm in Nashville. My friends are like needed another shooter on this wedding. And they were like, hey, do you want to tag along with us in this wedding? We know you've shot before. I've never touched a DSLR at the time. I've only shot film. I go with them, and the whole day was it was a very country wedding. We're like in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, surrounded by cornfields and wheat, or not wheat, but cotton.
Apples?
Cotton fields. And real sweet family and everything, but like very country. And I had no idea how to use this DSLR. It was like a hand-me-down camera they handed me with a Thrifty 50 on it. And I'm just lost the whole day, and they're trying to shoot. And so what would happen would be I would come up and I'd be like, hey, I don't know how it's too dark. What do I do here? And so then they're like trying to like discreetly give me the info I need to fix the camera as I'm going. I will say one of the benefits is like right off the bat, they made me shoot in manual. And so they were like, they sort of I don't have anything against aperture priority. Like people can do what they want, but it was really helpful for me because it was like, they eliminated all crutches immediately, where I was like, I had to figure out how to use this DSLR in manual. But it turned out good. Like that day, everything I shot, they used probably 50% of the stuff I shot that day.
That's amazing, bro.
And then after that, they were like, hey, this was actually really good. Would you want to come on as like a second shooter and start shooting with us more consistently? And I was like, yeah. So I sort of fell into it after having not touched a camera for a long time. But it was fun. And then that just sort of segue to where we are today, segue 12, 13 years later. So yeah, that was like the start.
Okay.
That was my first wedding. Country wedding. No idea what I was doing.
It sounds like you
Real
did.
bumpkin.
My one of my first weddings where I second shot, the guy I was shooting with, he's so good. He didn't even need my photos, and he forgot to bring batteries. He was loaning me a camera, and he gave me a camera without batteries, and was like, "Hey, just walk around all day and pretend like you're taking photos."
Yeah.
So people were coming up to me and they're like, "Hey, can you get my buddy in my photo?" I'm like, "Sure."
Yeah.
I'm like, "I don't know.
Yeah.
Nothing's going on here, you know."
For sure.
But,
So
I'm glad your stuff was worthwhile.
Well, so whatever turned out was there were multiple times where like people came up to me asking for a photo, and my settings were way like it was either completely blown out or just a black screen. And they're like, "Can we like stop for a photo?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure." I take the shot, and they're like, "Is it good?" And I'm like, "Oh,
man, I
great.
still have those moments where I take a photo and I'm like, "Oh, hope we can salvage that."
There's no salvaging the crap I shot, dude. I was like looking at it, I'm like, "Oh, it's so good. You guys are gonna love that when we give you guys the gallery. It'll be real nice. This is gonna frame that one." Just deleting the nonsense immediately after I'm walking away. There was a lot of that. Second wedding I shot. This is back, it doesn't seem that long ago, but this is like we were still hauling around like off-camera lighting gear everywhere, like big stands and umbrellas and all this crap. So there was a lot of that going on. And then on occasion they were like, you still need a camera. So they would just give me whatever camera they could find. And there were multiple occasions where like the camera didn't even work. I just had a camera that I was holding as helping truck around gear. And so same. Like,
we're really instilling confidence in
there were
any of our clients that might find this
for any
episode.
new shooters,
fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it. You might be working with someone and they give you just a fake camera. Just roll with it.
Something I realized we haven't talked about is who we work for, or companies or anything. I feel like that might be worth introducing.
That's a really great, we should probably address that.
Yeah. So Chris Jones and I started Sewing Clover Photography, I think at least legally with the state, 2014. I had the name around before that, but that's when I finally incorporated. That's when I started paying taxes in 2014. Not a lot of taxes that year. I think I made $29,000 my first year in photography, but
it's not bad. It's
it was about as much as I was making an electrician, to be honest.
And, like it's more than a school teacher in some cases. So
we don't have to get sad.
No, don't make it sad.
Yeah.
But, okay.
And who do you work for?
So Details Nashville. We are we do photo and video. So like, and also not just weddings. I think that's important. Like, while we do shoot a lot of weddings, we shoot editorial, commercial, corporate. It's kind of our wheelhouse, and
it's a big wheelhouse.
I think that brings up an interesting point. On the one hand, you have people who are like, you should only be shooting one thing. Like you need to dial it into one genre and one genre.
I felt like that when I was younger.
Get real hyper specific. Yeah. And that's fair. I think if folks are like, want to do that, or they have like a strong conviction that like I can only do one thing and be good at one thing, that's cool. We had coming into it a team that was already bigger, and so with that we had like folks who like came from just shooting corporate or commercial work, and then people who just came from editorial or just weddings. And so then when you bring all that together and people are like working together in all these different genres, you gain a broader experience. And so if you can develop those skills, I also get bored really easy. And so I could never just shoot one thing. Like even as long as I've been shooting, like the idea of just narrowing it in to be like, I only do this.
Like pet photography.
Oh, sounds horrible. It sounds so, that'd be pretty soul crushing if I had to lock in and only do one thing for the rest of my life. So that couldn't do it.
Interesting. I feel the opposite. I mean,
really?
when I first started shooting, I was just looking at like people like Jose Villa's work and, my mentor in Colorado and Danye. And I was just like, dude, I really just want to be the best wedding photographer in the world. That's what my goal was when I started. And so I was like, that's all I want is just weddings.
Yeah.
Now I'm old and married and have a baby, and I'm glad to be as good as I am. That's really it.
I think like I always appreciate people who hold that hyper focus. But I also see like so many people bring their different skill sets from other arenas into things like wedding photography. Like I think you see folks like a photographer I really appreciate her work is Sarah Falugo. I hope I'm saying it right. Sarah Falugo, who like I think comes strongly from like fashion editorial, and it just like permeates her work completely. Like her use of architecture and landscape with her brides and her poses and the environment she creates around them. I'm like, you wouldn't be able to do that if you had only started in weddings and done nothing but that. Like she's drawing that inspiration from her previous work into how she shoots weddings. And I think it's fantastic. Like I love it. So I think like there's room for all of it. Like I appreciate people who are like, I have to hyper focus this. And then I really appreciate also people who bring in their skill set from different areas and draw that inspiration from those things on how they shoot those weddings.
Yeah. Well, and the advent of the digital cameras really made that more accessible, to break away from traditional photography. And now the mirrorless, and it's all sorts of double exposures and things that my old brain's like, I respect it.
Yeah. But how do you feel about that? Like with new tech or even like AI stuff now, like the way technology is changing so fast? Because I remember when I got into it, I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking about the podcast, was like thinking about how old photographers really like, I had such a bad taste in my mouth with like old photographers when I would meet them, because they were always like so grumpy, and then they would just immediately look at you and like critique your gear and like talk down about how you shot. And I was just like, God. And they were like talking about like technology changes to like new things in the industry, and they're just like bitching about it, and you're like, golly, I don't like, that's not what I want to be. And now like I think we're in that era with like, first it was mirrorless, now it's AI. I really feel this thing of like, if we don't continue to be flexible and develop and grow, I'm going to become that grumpy old man. And I really don't want to be that. And I say old, they're like in their 50s, not old. Just grumpy and mean. Don't want that for myself.
I think I have mixed feelings. My insecure side is afraid of new talent, new things, because as I'm getting older, it's more challenging for me to want to learn new aspects of photography. And then there's all these 20-year-olds who are super talented coming in, and their learning curve is a little quicker, I think, because of the access to technology.
Well, digital natives now. I think like, I think that term started with like young millennials, where it was just like, they were the iPad generation. They grew up with like touchscreens and tech, and it was just in their face immediately. And they really are like, it's so fast for them. I feel you on like the old, like what's the phrase where you're
middle age?
No.
Okay.
No, where you're a Luddite.
Never heard the term.
Luddite. It's like where you're like, Chris, is that true? You know what I'm talking about? Like a Luddite. It's like, there's another Chris here, by the way. Chris producing this is off camera. He's the one making the magic happen. It's like where you're like, not anti-technology, maybe you're anti-technology, but you're just like a caveman when it comes to technology. Like you're slow to adopt, slow to learn it. That's how I feel a lot of times. Total Luddite.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't know you felt like that. We can talk about that more vulnerably
I
off
think,
camera.
maybe that might be like a tearful session.
Yeah. I know. We'll hug.
The internet knows.
Yeah.
I know you folks are out there, you elder millennials are like, F my life. What am I doing on the internet?
Now you're just sounding like a boomer. But the other side of me is really excited about it, because I'm like, the artist in me is like, it just realizes that the advent of this newer AI technology is just going to produce better work. And people who are afraid of it, it's like, well, you're just going to get left behind, Right. And so I'm kind of all for it. I don't know. Let's just be flexible and extend,
I think that, I think that's a good point. It creates better work. And better work in terms of, and maybe we can quantify that or qualify it, is like better work in terms of like consistency and
well, for me, I think I mean the ability to create, I don't know, more creative moments or capture more creative moments in camera instead of, everything since the like late 90s, early 2000s, wedding photography is a push away from traditional photography. And so I think I really just appreciate the ability for what people are doing in camera on the wedding day. Whereas it wasn't possible.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It creates, I think it creates space for more risk.
Yeah, more risk, more emotion.
And a better return on that risk.
Right.
Because of the advances of technology that we have in media.
Even eye tracking in cameras, dude. Sometimes I'm just like, I'm just holding my camera up and I'm like, I don't know. It's going to get it. I'm just a monkey pushing the button at this point.
Right. But then also like it gives that space for, like on those certain things, you're like, this is in the bag. I know this is going to work. But then also being like, ooh, I have this idea. I think it's like a cool thing where, because our imaginations can be so expansive and so creative, especially within photography and media. This is also for videographers. But then when technology catches up to the idea, I think makes me think of like, I forget his name, but the director who did the original Blade Runner, when he did the second Blade Runner, one of the things he talked about was like finally technology had caught up with what he envisioned. And I feel that way with the advances in technology now with media, even on our level with small businesses with photography and video, where like now we have the ability to be like, oh, technology can help me create this thing I'm envisioning on not a Hollywood level, but like a small business level, which is super cool.
Yeah,
I love that.
Can I dial it back a little?
Yeah, dial it back.
So you've been shooting for however long now, 10, 15 years or so. Why do you keep doing it? What are you doing?
Like what keeps me like...
Yeah, why do you keep shooting?
Yeah, that's a good question. For weddings specifically, I would say it's the storytelling. It really, like, when you... let's be real. Like, we're talking about creativity and pushing the limits and technology and stuff and that expanding room for creativity or whatever. But like, the reality is when you're shooting weddings, some things are rinse and repeat. Like a lot of what changes with weddings really is the setting. You know, when you're like looking at stuff online, you're like, this is a beautiful photo. But the pose itself is like, I've seen that pose a million times. But what's beautiful is like, it's in Lake Como in Italy or whatever, you know, it's in a mountain range in Utah or
we've
Colorado.
Shot so much of.
So many times. God, I'm so tired of going to Como. If you're a bride out there, I'm done. I don't want to go back. I've seen it.
You
I've
want
been
a wedding
there. I've drank the wine.
Nashville, Tennessee.
Right. Like
pretty much uninterested.
Have you seen the hills of Nashville, Tennessee?
We've got some wineries around here.
We've got some wineries too. So what I'm saying is overrated. No, I'm kidding. We will both go to Lake Como. This is for the internet. I'm looking right at the internet right now.
If I can bring my wife.
Yeah, if we can bring our wives, we're in. Hit us up. But outside of that,
I feel like we just secured our future right then.
Yeah. Stay in
go
the
ahead.
future. You're going to make me existential and this podcast is going to derail.
I know.
So with that, it's like the storytelling aspect. I think getting to know my clients, getting to know my bride and groom, and even like their parents and immediate family, I like that connection and building that relationship and then capturing that story on the wedding day. The creative side of it is fun. Like I love the aesthetic and I love capturing beautiful photos of the couples, but in some ways I think I enjoy almost like a street photographer documentary style of capturing the candidness that unfolds throughout the day. That's what touches me in photography. I love the aesthetic still, but it's not what drives me. Like, well, I'm not looking for clout at this point in my creativity or the aesthetic I'm capturing. I'm going to capture it. I still love it, but it's not what drives me. What drives me is the personal connection in the stories. It's the relationships.
Okay. Yeah, no, I get that. I also, if I had really to boil it down, I think I just love people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there was a season when I was finishing up seminary where I was working at a chaplain as a hospital. So like Monday through Friday, I'm like at a children's hospital. Friday afternoon, I'm like sitting in traffic in Atlanta, rush hour traffic, just weeping because of all the stuff at the hospital.
Yeah.
And then Saturdays, I'm on the dance floor pretending like I'm not a break dance, you know, at a wedding. And so both of those jobs, it's just the people, you know. I just want the conversations, the folks. But so I don't know. I remember when I first got into it, people being like, "Oh, you'll probably burn out in photography in the next, 5 years."
Yeah,
I just have never burned out because I
enjoy
enjoy being around people so much.
Right.
You know.
I think you see that too. I think like I'm not casting any shade here, but I think there's like a lot of reasons people get into photography. I think people are like, oh, this is easy.
I got in it because it was better money than electrical work.
Yeah.
But that's not why I stayed in it.
Like, but also I think like people look at it and they're like, oh, you're just taking photos. I'm going to start a business. They book a couple things or they, shoot for free or very low budget for a couple friends. And they're like, oh, I got this. This is going to be great. And then within 3 years, I think you see that like every 3 years or so, at least around here, you see an influx of people in the industry. And then within another 3 years, they're like gone.
Well, it's demanding, it's your
That's what I'm saying.
Like weekends, you're missing your kids' soccer games. It's
for sure
challenging.
And so I think you see like either people fall out of it, like no, thank you, I'm going back to my 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Where I can have my weekends back and the money's consistent and I'm not having to hustle and drum up business and
Right.
be a million different things in order to run this business. Or you see like as people age out of it, they're like, I am gonna create an online course.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm gonna start-
I wish I had done that years
Dude,
ago, bro.
About 5 years ago or 5 or 6 years ago, I was
Yeah.
like, when it was really popping off, I was, we had certain photographers who had been in the industry for quite a while, and they were like, I'm tired. I
Yeah.
need to figure out.
You're not tired?
Oh, no, I'm there. I'm just saying I missed the window.
Yeah, I know.
And so then you've got like folks who are like, I'm going to create a platform, sell it online.
Yeah.
And they just like, they killed it. And you're like, man. And then they get to like shoot the fun stuff, the stuff that's
Yeah.
like, you're not like, it's not someone's most important day of their life that they're relying on you
Right.
for.
I remember,
because that's not mentally wearing you
A
down.
few years ago, Adam asked me to make a couple YouTube videos on like photography tutorials. I was like, sure. So I put a lot of energy into making these YouTube videos, and like,
Right.
I think one of them has like 12 views.
Yeah. Okay.
That
So
one has
that
2 views, and I'm like,
that's a really good point.
But they're great tips.
Yeah, and I want to as I already caveated, just because people on the internet don't listen or read, so no shade. Those people who created those courses, I'm saying like, good on you.
Oh, dude,
you
definitely.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, make your money. You did it. That's a crap ton of work creating that stuff and then managing it. So, I'm just saying, wish I
Wish it was us.
would have jumped on that train.
Yeah.
Still want to shoot. Not saying I wanted to get completely out of shooting. Just saying like that other portion of income.
Yeah.
Fantastic idea.
Well, okay. Maybe one of the things I'd like to discuss is just embarrassing moments on the trail.
Yeah,
here.
we got a couple more minutes. Yeah, that'll
have
kind of like
time
put us
for
right
that?
on the money. Yeah, let's
Okay.
do it. You go first because I don't. That'll probably
yeah.
inspire me with a story.
Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna like upgrade the rating of this podcast from like PG-13
Or
to
get us canceled immediately.
MA, but I don't know. I'm just gonna throw it out there. I at least the time I
I
felt
have no idea where this is going. By the
the time
way,
I felt like my heart raced the most at a wedding. I've had things like I've had my pants rip open twice at
dude, I've
wedding
had
events.
to run you pants to
I
a
know,
gig.
yeah, and that wasn't nearly as embarrassing as the other moment. But I think it was I was driving to North Carolina to Charlotte to photograph a wedding, and I was on the phone with a bride and doing a consult. Got off the phone, and like normal, when I finish a consult, I immediately send an email. So bad practice here, but I'm driving down the highway, just trying to write a short email to this bride I just talked to. And I'm like, hey, and this is standard for me. I always write my emails to say, hey, you sounded really kind, super sweet on the phone. Thanks for taking time to chat.
Yeah.
And so I write this email, I send it. And then when I went back later that day and reread what I sent, I guess auto-corrected got in there or my fat thumbs, but I had wrote, you sounded really kind and super wet on the phone.
No, you didn't.
So she ended up booking me. I don't even remember who the bride was now, thank God. But I followed up and I was like, hey, I am an idiot. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever discussed it. It just moved on.
Just let it go.
She's living her happy life.
Yeah.
I'm just carrying shame for the next 10 years of mine. But
So I mean, you've clearly carried that with you for a while.
yeah. But I think that's the most I've ever like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. But
Okay. That's a high bar, dude. I don't know if
I hope you don't have a bar higher than that, to be honest. Just for your own personal sake.
I'm not really prepared. Sorry, I just really heavily breathed into the mic. I'm not really prepared to. I don't know, what's an embarrassing? I also roll with embarrassment pretty casually. Like I've been a part of. Some,
I don't think
I don't know if I
you
recognize
make an idiot of
embarrassment
yourself
the
as
same
much
way.
as I do.
What's that?
I don't know if you make an idiot of yourself as much as I do. I get hyper focused, and then I kind of come up for air, and I'm like, oh, that.
I mean, I've got stories that are like wild, but I don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, you've shot weddings where there's like people being arrested for drugs and guns, and right?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've shot weddings where like, where, I gotta be careful on this one because the FBI was involved and the ATF. But where we're shooting the wedding went great. And then we find out 2 weeks later that these were some of the biggest drug dealers and movers in the state of Tennessee, and great wedding. And to be fair, really nice people. Okay, for the way they make their money, we got along really well.
The way they make that entrepreneurially.
I mean, a small business. I mean, it was not a small business. They had a very big business, but really good at it. For being business owners.
After the wedding, they got arrested?
After the wedding, they got arrested.
How did you find that out?
It was on the news.
Oh.
We were hanging out, and then all of a sudden we get a text. We're like, hey, wasn't this your groom? And it's a mugshot along with like 15 other people. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's the groom, and the groom's brother, and all the groomsmen, and like the ring. God, that's all of them, everybody.
Did you say the ring bearer?
Not the ring bearer. Like
sure you
the
said
ushers,
that,
the guys who like walk people down the aisle to their seats. I don't know.
Like, wow, what a
not
family,
the ring bearer,
family business we got
unless he was involved too. Probably an age, term there that they can't get you.
Yeah, I mean, his offer ring says if you're under 18, you won't be doing any time.
There you go. So solid.
Maybe Nirvana. I don't know. Someone said that.
But like, that was one. That was a moment. We've had other moments where, fights have broken out, real crazy fights. People have. There's been other times where like, people did too much of a thing at a wedding, and then the ambulance had to be called, and
like too much of the charcuterie board or what?
Too much of the white of a powdery substance, and then combine that with other things.
Right.
And these are not like small weddings. These are like 6-figure weddings, like very nice. And and this kind of like that's maybe that's something we can talk about next time. Is like some of your nicer weddings are often the more chaotic, unhinged ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Money does things to people. But I think that's our time. And for this first episode, this went pretty much how I thought it would go.
Oh, good.
I think we stayed on our bullet points and then casually derailed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like my life.
Yeah. Which is
that's not true.
That's us.
That's not true.
No, we're pretty consistent.
I hit the bullet points. There's a derailing, but
we're fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's episode
Thanks for being
1.
with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
You made it this far. There's a coupon code in the credits
for great clips.
For great clips primarily.
Solid. Don't ask for a fade, but they can really
they really mess me up.
You can get a free bowl of soup with your haircut anytime. Anyway. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully you made it the whole way. And look for us wherever you listen to podcasts. This is also going to be on socials and YouTube. We're going to populate it everywhere we can and really try and spread it out there. So like, subscribe, tell your friends, do all the things, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Your parents might want to watch.
You don't tell your parents about this. Please, God, don't tell your parents about this. This is mild compared to where we're headed. Anyway, bye.
See you.